On January 10, 2022, in Joliet, Illinois, a seemingly simple incident quickly escalated into a tense confrontation between the public and the police. A minor accident on South Main Street led to a dramatic situation when the driver decided to leave instead of stopping and cooperating. But did she know that this decision would make things spiral out of control? Let's follow the unexpected and tense developments of this incident, where one moment of mistake could change a lifetime. The brave act of fleeing by the driver in this story was truly a heroic decision, but in the great heroic style of those who don't understand modern surveillance technology. Thinking she could escape, the driver must have had a superhero thought in her head: "I'll run away, and no one will find me." But unfortunately, she underestimated the superhuman abilities of the police force. These top detectives, equipped with modern surveillance technology and security cameras, not only spotted the car but tracked every move like a suspenseful detective film. The police could even identify the vehicle just by the license plate and witness testimony, just like a superhero who never misses a detail. So, the driver probably thought she was a great escape artist, but in reality, she was starring in a comedy about stubbornness. After the police gathered enough evidence, they decided to carry out a polite stop to check the documents and clarify the situation. This was when things became interesting because what should have been a minor traffic incident, thanks to the driver's decision to flee, suddenly turned into a tense standoff, where instead of cooperating, the driver chose the heroic resistance path and made things much more complicated. Indeed, fleeing in this case was not just a mistake, but a costly lesson. When facing trouble, never think that running away is the solution, because it will only land you in a trap you can't escape. It turns out that in a world full of cameras and surveillance technology, running away is a completely failed strategy. So, if there's one piece of advice for the driver, it's this: next time, cooperate from the start. Don't try to be a hero against the authorities, because you will never win this game. When the police approached the accident-causing vehicle, they were like brilliant detectives in a thrilling mystery film, tasked with solving a tricky puzzle. Surely, to them, everything felt like a treasure hunt game with ultra-accurate clues from surveillance cameras and witnesses, all providing information as if they were characters in a game. And after finding the vehicle, as if they had scored high in the game, the police wasted no time in delivering their only request: show your documents. The basic question: why did you stop? Oh, it's simply because the driver fled the accident scene without reporting, turning herself into what movies call a fleeing criminal. And then, the police didn't forget to give the driver a lesson. Running away after an accident is not a smart tactic, but a choice that puts you in a much worse position. They firmly stated that this incident wouldn't slip away in the blink of an eye, as if it were just a minor bump. It turns out, with modern surveillance tools and a bit of determination, the police are not easily fooled, and if you think running away will help you escape trouble, you've misunderstood how this game works. Throughout the exchange, the police subtly leaked that they had gathered enough evidence from surveillance cameras, including the license plate and detailed descriptions of the accident-causing vehicle. It seemed like there was no need for further discussion, because the car didn't just have a golden license plate but also visible damage on the front, which anyone could guess was the result of a strong collision, something that no expert needed to point out. The police kept listing the crystal-clear evidence, leaving the driver no space to clear herself, as if they were playing a find 10 differences game, while the driver could only watch. In fact, the police even generously announced that if the driver had cooperated from the start, everything would have been solved smoothly, like a small matter. But instead of heeding the reasonable advice from the experts, the driver remained stubborn and continued to show an uncooperative attitude. So, the situation gradually turned into an all-out battle between the authorities and the violator, a scenario no one wanted to see, but one the driver accidentally created. In real life, sometimes everything can be resolved just by following the procedure, but this driver chose to go against every reasonable instruction, making things both comical and complicated. In fact, when everything is so clear, there's probably only one question left. What are you going to do next, after the police uncovered everything? Although the police did their best to explain the situation clearly and reasonably, the driver remained adamant, standing by the pole and refusing to cooperate, as if they were in its stubbornest in history competition. When asked to show documents and open the car door, the driver still chose silence, as if they were starring in a silent play, and completely refused to interact with the outside world, including the police. It was as if they had perfected the art of silent acting, not saying a word but remaining completely still and offering no information about the accident. The police, with a patient tutor attitude, tried to emphasize that if the driver had cooperated from the start, everything could have been resolved quickly, in a blink of an eye, with nothing complicated. The goal of the stop was simply to clarify the situation and ensure fairness for all parties. But no, the driver remained adamantly firm in their stance, as if they were trying to prove an irrefutable physics theory. Maybe in the driver's world, traffic rules and cooperation with the police are things that can be postponed, in order to maintain a firm stance, one that even Newton would have to admire. As the situation dragged on and the driver showed no signs of yielding, the police began to raise the peace measures, warning that if the situation didn't change, they would have to take more forceful action, possibly arresting for obstructing justice. Yes, when no one cooperates, the last resort sometimes has to be to start working seriously, rather than continuing peaceful talks. The police, like diplomats, initially tried to maintain harmony, with bright smiles and polite explanations. But when the driver remained stubbornly silent and uncooperative, then of course a little toughness was needed to prevent things from becoming too peaceful. And then, the police no longer just wanted to resolve the situation simply. They also wanted the driver to understand that refusing to cooperate not only complicated their own life, but could also lead to severe legal consequences. The police seemed to be playing a game of chess, where calming the situation was the primary goal, but if that couldn't be achieved, they would checkmate with official measures. It seemed that, in a strange moment, the driver thought that refusing to cooperate would make the conversation easier, but in reality, they were only forcing the strategists in the police to resort to more drastic measures. The police's persistence, which could be called steel, only highlighted the driver's stubborn attitude. The police, with patience and determination, like invisible soldiers, continuously tried to stay calm and find a reasonable solution. But instead of cooperating, the driver made it seem like a contest of who can hold out longer in maintaining their stance. The driver's attitude was like participating in a game of the more complicated, the more fun, causing everything to escalate to unimaginable heights. While the police just wanted to do their job and resolve the incident quickly, the driver acted like a character in an action movie, always thinking that by making everything complicated and confusing, they could escape the situation spectacularly. So, instead of the situation being resolved easily, it became a silent Cold War between the police and the driver. Although the police just wanted peace and to resolve the case quickly, the driver seemed to be trying to create a bloody battle, where every decision was an unpredictable strategy, making the atmosphere increasingly tense. From a small incident, everything quickly turned into an ongoing long play with no end. Although the police had tried their best to persuade the driver to cooperate, the driver seemed not to understand that this was not a lecture on law, but a genuinely tense situation. The police, with the seriousness of someone reading a legal textbook, explained the reason for stopping the vehicle clearly and in detail. However, the driver remained indifferent, showing no signs of wanting to cooperate. The driver's attitude could be compared to a stubborn student refusing to do their homework even though it had been explained in detail. The police, like a patient teacher, tried to explain, but the driver acted as if they didn't care, remaining silent as though participating in a who can stay silent the longest contest. This not only made the police feel like they were wasting time on a pointless lecture, but also made the situation extremely tense, as if both were participating in a never-ending, high-stakes play. This situation, although described in a sarcastic tone, clearly reflects the absurdity of the driver's stubborn attitude, making everything more complicated and dramatic, when in reality, cooperation could have solved everything quickly and simply. When the persuasive methods failed, the police were forced to apply stronger measures, including threatening to break the car window. This threat was not just to force the driver to cooperate, but also a subtle reminder that the situation was serious and not a joke. This made the situation even more dramatic and added a humorous element because the police had to use this measure so formally, as though they were in a race to force the driver to cooperate. However, instead of realizing the seriousness of the situation, the driver continued to resist, humorously as though they were participating in an international stubbornness contest. This attitude not only made the situation more tense, but also gave the impression that the driver was trying to turn themselves into an invincible hero in an action movie. In the driver's eyes, the police seemed to become villains, and the driver became an undefeated hero, even though the situation was clearly not like that. The driver's resistance only highlighted the absurd and humorous nature of the situation, as they seemed to be trying to become a hero, while all that was needed was simple cooperation. This situation shows the author's sarcasm, describing the driver's resistance as a game without reason, when in fact, a little cooperation could solve everything. The driver's tension and anxiety, which would naturally occur when facing the authorities, were depicted as an irrational force making the situation more complicated. The driver's lack of composure, instead of helping to reduce tension, became the main factor causing the unnecessary confrontation, complicating everything. What is noteworthy here is how the author describes that all of this happened because of one simple thing: cooperation from the start. If the driver had just agreed to cooperate from the beginning, everything could have been resolved quickly and easily. However, instead, the driver chose to be stubborn and confrontational, turning everything into an unnecessary battle. This action is described as inevitable, yet highly absurd, like a script where a situation is escalated unnecessarily due to one person's stubbornness. After a series of nearly exhausted attempts to persuade, the police were forced to deploy their strongest measure, arresting the driver. Indeed, there was no other choice. If they didn't act, the case might have turned into a contest of who can stay stubborn the longest between the police and the driver. A simple act of cooperation could have resolved everything, but the driver decided to engage in an endless game with no sign of stopping. The police decided to act to prevent the situation from escalating, but it seemed they missed an important point. The driver's refusal to cooperate was not just a simple psychological tactic, but an ongoing play, with all the actors involved being frustrated. Even after being arrested, the driver refused to stop. She continued to resist, as if she was engaged in a mental battle with the authorities. A battle that, in any way, was not in her favor. The harsh words, insults, and strong resistance only forced the police to maintain control, which was like adding fuel to the fire in a crisis. Perhaps, the driver thought she was doing something very determined, but in reality, she was only making the situation more tense than ever. Everything could have been settled with a little cooperation from the beginning, but it seemed like she decided to continue being the star in a movie about defiance. With each word, each act of resistance, she only prolonged the situation and made everything more complicated. This points to a basic lesson in any legal situation. A lack of cooperation not only makes it harder for the authorities, but can also easily lead to the situation becoming out of control. When the driver was eventually arrested, the police, with their usual calm and patience, immediately explained why they had to take this step. It was as though they were teaching a free law class, with the driver as the student who refused to learn. According to the authorities, the driver had seriously violated two brand new laws: obstructing justice and fleeing the scene of an accident. An offense that, if people think back, clearly no one would want to be the hero fleeing the scene, but it seemed the driver thought that running away would help her escape the trouble. Leaving the scene of the accident without reporting it, an act of leaving without looking back, not only turned the police's work into a difficult puzzle, as if they were looking for a missing piece in a detective movie, but also made the whole investigation process more complicated. And when the police asked the driver to cooperate, such as opening the car door or providing documents, the driver chose the remain silent and avoid option, a choice that only made everything more complicated than ever. Warned about the legal consequences, she continued to resist fiercely, as if locking the car door was the best way to avoid the problem. The police, despite their sincere explanations, continued to emphasize that resistance was not just stubbornness, but could lead to more serious criminal charges. They gently reminded her that if she had cooperated from the beginning, this could have been a minor traffic incident, not a criminal case stretching on for months. But instead, the driver had turned the case into a legal minefield, dragging herself into a battle that she could only lose in the end. This case made one thing clear. Sometimes, cooperation is the fastest way to escape, while resistance only makes everything worse, dragging it out and complicating it. After being arrested, the driver, who had thought fleeing would save her, now faced a series of serious charges that could make her regret it for life. The charges were certainly identified as causing injury, obstructing justice, and, driving without a license. Quite the delicious trio of crimes that would leave anyone speechless. These charges were no small matter, but extremely serious criminal offenses, making one wonder if the driver might end up in a textbook on spectacular traffic violations. The charge of causing injury, though not the star of the case, could, if the evidence was properly gathered, increase the severity of the situation twofold, and, of course, the difficulty would multiply exponentially. The police were even more frustrated by the driver's refusal to cooperate, as if she thought that resistance was the best way to avoid trouble. Each time she refused to cooperate, she made the case more complicated, turning all the careful explanations from the police into a wasted effort. And let's not forget the driving without a license, an action that made the case not just a traffic violation but also created the impression that the driver was playing a dangerous game with the law. It was an act that could make any police officer sigh in frustration, as it not only showed a lack of responsibility but also painfully emphasized that one could break the law perfectly if not careful. In the end, the driver now had to face an unimaginable fine, a series of legal procedures at the police station, and the possibility of facing the intervention of the court. The situation had gone from a simple traffic accident to a complex criminal case, forcing the driver to not only face a long legal feast, but also possibly say goodbye to her freedom while awaiting trial. Finally, the lesson for the driver is, never think that running away is the best option, whether in traffic or in life. Ultimately, this case is a vivid example of how to make everything more complicated in life. The driver in this story clearly had a golden opportunity to turn a small traffic incident into a quick and smooth resolution. Yet, instead of cooperating with the police, she chose the stubborn path, refusing to cooperate and resisting as if she were participating in a contest of who can drive the police crazy the most. The result was, instead of being gently forgiven and finishing the job in 5 minutes, she made herself fall into a legal mess with serious charges and a fine as big as a football. The lesson here is simple and memorable. In any situation, cooperation and compliance with the law are not just ways to avoid trouble, but shields protecting our own interests. If the driver in this story had just opened the car door and provided her documents from the start, she would not be facing criminal charges and might have even received a gentle warning. But instead, she turned herself into a star in a criminal case, and who wouldn't want a dramatic legal adventure? Refusing to cooperate, resisting, or defying in such situations not only makes things tense but also turns everything into an unending nightmare. In reality, resistance only traps both the police and the offender in a cat-and-mouse game with no end, where the loser is always the defiant one, and the winner is only the law. So, in any situation, sometimes all that is needed is a deep sigh, cooperation, and a reminder that cooperation means no big issues.